Welcome to CodeScene's next level of pull request integration with automated reviews, your team's defense against technical debt. So, CodeScene's pull request integration is completely automated. You enable it, and each time I as a developer open a pull request, CodeScene receives a webhook, and we automatically review your code and post our feedback. And this is just a quick example of what it could look like. So here we see in my pull request, CodeScene went in as a bot, and it reviewed the code. And in this case, CodeScene points out that there are a number of gates that fail. So it seems that I didn't respect the code half rules. I made the code worse. That is, it's now harder to maintain, harder to understand for my colleagues, and more challenging to extend in the future. But CodeScene also has much more context-specific gates. So for example, we see here that there seems to be a different quality bar for new code. That is, when I write new code, there's no legacy, right? There's no reason to settle with imperfect code. And there are other gates too, like for example, CodeScene knows that not all code is equally important. So we put some extra eyes on your hotspots. And in this case, those gates all seem to pass. Good for me. Now, how do you get started with this? Inside your CodeScene UI, you have the option to configure either the pull request at the global level, that is, apply the same rules to all projects, or you can override it on a per project basis and tailor to whatever is best for your organization. When you enable the pull request integration, the first thing you have to do is to choose a quality profile. So the default is to use something called the bare minimum. The bare minimum gives you a minimal safety net against technical debt and bad code. What we do in the minimal safety net is that we ensure that your hotspots won't decline in code health. That's really important. Those are the parts of the code that you work on the most. They're really critical for your throughput and productivity. And we also check that new code is healthy. You saw an example on that in the previous pull request. And finally, we enforce parts of the code health rule set, specifically the critical code health rules. So what are critical code health rules? Well, the critical code health rules are shown here. And these are the type of rules that, they're very hard to argue with. There's never a good reason to violate them. For example, low cohesion. Why would you ever stuff too many business requirements into the same module? It just doesn't make sense. Or why would you do a brain method? That is a large and complex function which centralizes the behavior of the module. Brain methods are disastrous, and there's never a good reason for them. There's always a better design. Or deep nested complexity, nesting if statements inside if statements. There's always a better design option available. So the bare minimum profile is pretty relaxed. And as such, it's a very good starting point if you're just getting started with automated code reviews, because it provides a gentle onboarding path so that the team can learn to act on this feedback. After a couple of weeks, when you feel that you and your colleagues are up to speed with how the automated reviews work, you're used to the type of feedback, you have learned about the critical code health rules, the time might be ripe to graduate to the next level, which is the Clean Code Collective. So the Clean Code Collective includes everything that's in the minimal safety net together with something we call quality guardians. So quality guardians are a little bit more strict because now we enforce the complete code health rule set, which includes advisory rules. So what are advisory rules? Well, let's check again. So advisory rules are the ones you see in the UI as warnings, and these are important. They really, really are, and you want to do your best to follow these guidelines. However, these rules are also slightly more subjective. There might be times when you want to tweak them or when you want to ignore them. So for example, complex method. It's a very, very common code smell. And a complex method is simply a method or a function with high cyclomatic complexity. Now, there might be opinions on what high complexity is. So that's why this rule is optional. Or large method, personal favorite. Overly long functions make the code hard to read. However, some teams are comfortable having slightly larger functions. This is why that rule is advisory and not critical. So whatever you choose, if you enable quality guardians, then you have exactly the same rule set being checked as we used in the code red research and the code red papers. So this gives you all these benefits of having a business impact via code quality improvements. Now, there's a third option too, and this one is for teams that actively want to pay down technical debt. So if you select that option, you see that in addition to the safety guards here, we also enable a set of rules in the Elevate Code Health category. And these rules relate to the goals you specify in the CodeScene UI. So maybe as a team or maybe as a technical leader, you decide that we really need to refactor this part of the code. So you set a refactoring goal on it. And if you have this option enabled in the PR, we will check that rule. We will ensure that the code is actually being refactored. If not, we will fail the gate, let you know. Finally, there's a much more flexible option too. Maybe you want to combine these checks rules across the categories. In that case, you just select the customizable quality gates, and you can say that I want to prevent hotspot decline. So that's a very low bar, but it might be a valid starting point if you're just getting used to CodeScene. And maybe you also want to enforce supervised goals, and if you have any refactoring goals, you want to make sure that these are on track. So this gives you a true minimal set to getting started with. As you see in the UI, there's another option too. Instead of selecting from our predefined quality gates, you can also use something we call configuration as code. So what's that? Configuration as code is something you use if you need to have additional flexibility. Perhaps you want to have different quality standards for different parts of the code. Maybe you have a legacy part where you want to get away with the bare minimum, and you have some new code where it's really important that that code remains maintainable. Or you have different teams. Maybe you have one team where you want to have one set of rules and different rules for the rest of the organization. Or perhaps you have a monorepo with hundreds of developers and you just want to enable the pull request for one or two of these teams. Configuration as code allows you to do it. And it's all based on a JSON file. You simply download our JSON template and you check it into your repository. Let's have a quick look at the JSON file. So I have to admit that the JSON file looks much nicer with syntax highlighting, but it's quite simple, so I think we can figure this out together. So everything is based on a number of rule sets, so you can have multiple rules inside the same JSON file. And the first option here shows you how we can assign a specific quality profile to one team. So what does this mean? Well, it means that each time a member of Team 1 does a PR, we will use the quality profile pay down tech debt. So this is a way of personalizing the quality gates based on the context of the team. What you can also do is that you can use a much more customizable approach where you specify individual gates, enable, disable them. And instead of specifying this per team, you can choose to match by your repository paths. So in this case, any code that's located under your source folder and is a Java file will use these gates. Finally, as an advice, it really pays off to end up with a very strict quality profile that serves as a catch-all pattern. So if I do commit to some other parts of the code where I haven't defined custom profiles, then I can make sure that I at least have this safety net, this fallback. So it's more of a best practice than a must-have. Now, whatever options you choose, it's important to know that this is not only about gating and guarding, it's also about giving positive feedback. So let's look at an example. So here's a PR where we made some significant code health improvements, and we see that CodeScene highlights this. And if I click on View Improvements, I can see exactly what I managed to improve. So it seems that I made a significant code health improvement. This file is now healthy, and I did so by improving a bunch of code smells. So these code smells are either gone or much less severe than they used to be. So by using the PRs, you ensure that everyone in your team is aligned with what your quality standards are, and these quality standards are within your control, not the tools. So I wish you all the best, and may the code be with you.